Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Beyond Budget Headlines, where we dissect, analyze and understand the happenings around the upcoming budget. I am Ruchika Chitravanshi and I am joined by a consulting editor and policy expert, Mr. Ashok Kumar Bhattacharya. Hi AKB, welcome to the show. How have you been?
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent.
So if you've been reading the papers, from the last 2 weeks, we are seeing that the finance minister is making headlines. And in what I think is like another teaser to the budget, she said this budget will be like never before. I mean, never before have we seen such teasers to the budget as if it's some blockbuster movie that is going to come. What do you make of it?
Well, she's clearly raising expectations of the people from the budget. So the scope for disappointment probably gets higher. The second consequence is probably that the finance minister has indeed lined up some big measures, and those big measures will be such that she thinks it is necessary to prepare the people of this country for those steps. Now, it is possible that those steps will mean more spending, more outlays for health and education, and many other sectors that need utmost attention right now, infrastructure, for example. But it is also possible that she is preparing the nation for some measures that people may not always like. For example, could there be the possibility of a one-time COVID tax?
Yes.
Now, where does the government get the money from at a time when it is required and expected to spend more? So, in that situation, maybe she's preparing the people, the nation, with that announcement that this will be a never-before budget, and so that the people get ready and they are in a mood to absorb the kind of shock that in the early days, of course, her proposals may create.
Very rightly pointed, sir. In fact, the states are already worried about the budget cuts that centrally sponsored schemes and the central schemes might have. Before we get your perspective on that, just for the benefit of our viewers, there are around 30 centrally sponsored schemes, and there are 685 central schemes, such as the interest subsidy for short-term credit to farmers, fertilizer subsidies, food subsidy. There are employment guarantee schemes, and there is the PM Awas Yojana. So what impact do you see of this indication that has come from the finance ministry that centrally sponsored schemes might face a budget cut? Because somewhere the money has to come from.
You have to take a larger perspective to understand this. There are two kinds of expenditure that the government of India undertakes through its budgetary resources. One is what are called central sector schemes. Now, there are about 86 odd schemes, whether it is the White Revolution scheme or the Green Revolution scheme, or whether it is the health sector scheme. These are all central sector schemes where the government spends the money, and I am referring to the center right now. Entire 100% of that scheme is taken care of by the center with its own resources. And just for the record, in 2021, the government had committed to spending around 8.3 trillion rupees on these 86 broad schemes. Now, we are not talking about these central sector schemes where the government directly spends schemes across the country depending on which state wants which schemes and which are the areas that are identified. The acts that you're talking about is likely to fall on the centrally sponsored schemes. And as you rightly pointed out, there are about 6 what we call the core of core schemes, and there are another 24 which are core schemes. Now here what happens is that not the entire money for these schemes comes from the center. The center provides, depending on the schemes, maybe 50%, in some cases it is 60%, In some cases, it is 80%. And some of the schemes which are implemented in the northeastern states, it is 90%. Now, there, the government, for example, this current year, it is the government is expected to spend around 3.4 trillion rupees under these 30 centrally sponsored schemes. For example, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme is coming under the core of core schemes.
Yes.
Now, the question is, can the government or should the government spend more on centrally sponsored schemes, or should it spend more on central sector schemes? Now, I think the answer to this question should come from the availability of resources, because as you would know, that the 14th Finance Commission had increased the allocation of resources to be shared with the states from 32% of the divisible pool, the tax pool, to 42%. Now, this has been brought down a little bit by the 15th Finance Commission, but it still remains 41 to 42%. But at the same time, the allocation for centrally sponsored schemes came down. Now, therefore, now the expectation and the demand is, can those centrally sponsored schemes allocation be further cut? I think you have to, cut the coat according to the cloth. If the government doesn't have adequate resources, so it has to, fine-tune its contribution to the centrally sponsored schemes, keeping that in mind. Politically speaking, the government at the center tends to gain more if they spend more on central sector schemes rather than on centrally sponsored schemes, because the political credit of any scheme or any expenditure program comes directly to the center if it goes under the central sector schemes. Whereas in a centrally sponsored schemes, the money is shared, the cost is shared, so therefore the credit is also gets shared. Ultimately, you have to have a system by which the states are also on board on what are the kind of schemes that they want the money to be spent. So in a centrally sponsored schemes, the states do complain that why are they being asked to take a share of the burden of expenditure, even though they feel that there is nothing much in that scheme. So it requires greater consultation with the states, which earlier used to be conducted during the Planning Commission days. The last 5-6 years, these consultations do take place, but states are often complaining that such consultations are very rare. So therefore, if you want to see more centrally sponsored schemes, wherein the center and the states are sharing the burden of total expenditure, you also need greater consultation so that the state-specific requirements are also met.
The so-called cooperative federalism that
that's right.
has been talking about. Fiscal constraints, etc., and around fiscal constraints, our discussions have been there in the last 2 episodes as well. Fiscal Council is again in the news. And what do you think is the purpose of a fiscal council? Will it help? Will it help having more accountability towards the fiscal deficit of the country? Do you think we need a fiscal council?
To have a fiscal council, it will be important to have a body that not only talks about the central fiscal situation, but also the state's fiscal situation, because as you know, that the combined size of the state's budget is right now almost 30% more than the center's fiscal budget. In other words, the center's fiscal budget is important, but it is now lower in size compared to the combined size of the state's budget. So it will be important to have a fiscal council that can inform the managers of the economy at the center as well as the states that what are the trends that they need to be watched and what kind of steps that need to be taken. And each state can then look at those recommendations. So I'm suggesting a kind of a body, something on the lines of a GST council, wherein a fiscal council can actually look at the fiscal roadmap for not just the center, but also for the states.
Absolutely, sir. So another recommendation for the upcoming budget that has come from the CII is to have a multiple bad bank system. We have discussed bad banks in the past as well, and the idea has been criticized by many policy experts. What do you think at this stage?
A lot of people believe that the idea of a bad bank is a bad idea because if you create a bad bank, who will create that bad bank? Probably you will once again seek recourse to the exchequer's finances. In other words, the government will have to shell out more money from the taxpayers' contributions and they'll float a bad bank. And if I heard you correctly, CII is not just asking for only one bad bank, and quite a few bad banks. Now, this would mean that the government's resources will have to be put in the equity of quite a few bad banks. Now, if your goal is to resolve stressed assets or stressed loans, loans that are in trouble, and if you have a fairly effective insolvency and bankruptcy code in operation, I would say that it is better to rely on the IBC and make sure that the IBC's enforcement is not kept in abeyance for a longer period of time, and it should be brought back in its full import, and so that the challenges of resolving sticky loans can be dealt with by the provisions of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Instead, what will happen is in the bad bank, you will create a new institution with the help of government money, and that bad bank will probably become so bad that it has to be rescued.
Yeah.
And the government money will go after us. It will become a vicious cycle. So I think if we have achieved some success in the operation of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, all energies should be focused on how IBC can be made more effective, and then look for other solutions.
Absolutely. In fact, in the upcoming budget session, we are expecting some amendments to the IBC code as well. A lot of indications coming there ahead of the budget, 5 weeks to go. And thank you so much, AKB, for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruchika. Thank you.
We will keep an eye on all the developments that happen in the coming week and bring to you more news and analysis around the upcoming budget headlines. Thank you so much, sir.
If you liked this video, do share it and subscribe to Business Standard. You can also log on to our website for more news, views and insights, business-standard.com. We are also present on all social media platforms, so do follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.